Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That motion carries. All members are participating, with Supervisor Reynolds being remote. All members, others are here. Public comment, nobody approached either the clerk or myself. So we will move on to the approval of the minutes from the November 19th meeting. What are your wishes? Moved by a motion by Supervisor Lemmer to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. We'll jump to 6A1, approve combining parcels for tax delinquent property at 446 Old Highway 51, Mosinee. I think if you want to lead us in that discussion.
I think Rob from CPZ is here that can talk.
Pointed out some stuff
Rob,
from
you
land records.
gotta use
Use
the
the
mic.
microphone.
I just pointed out some stuff from land records regarding these two parcels to give a little more detail. I guess the first page is the land records listing of the two parcels, showing the abbreviated legal descriptions and addresses of the parcels. The next page is just maps of the parcels, with the smaller parcel being to the north in blue and the larger parcel in green to the south. And then below that, there's also a aerial from 2020 with the approximate measurements and areas. This is not a survey, it's just taken off land record or GIS mapping, so it's not intended to be a survey. The next page kind of gives you a bigger picture of the neighborhood with the two parcels shown, as well as an aerial of the same thing. And then after that, I've got the letter from the city of Mosinee that I got by email, and that was pertaining to the zoning for those two parcels. And I guess basically it's coming down to is whether or not the county should in fact combine these two parcels. And I guess I would say it would probably be a good idea, because the smaller parcel to the north is a non-conforming lot, so nobody would really be able to build on it or improve it. So you really would only have two options, and that would be to combine it with the parcel that you currently own that you want to get rid of, or maybe the person to the north would be interested in purchasing it. So those are the two options. I guess the only thing is I'm not sure what type of appraisal services that are used for these types of things, but you can maybe reach out to the appraiser and find out what the value of that narrow lot would be by itself versus what the combined value would be if it was rolled into the one to the south. But otherwise, like I said, it would make sense to combine it to either this parcel or the parcel that you currently own. And along with that email on the backside, it just shows the zoning and the fact it's zoned R3, it's in the Brown area. And like I said, that, specifies that it's not in, or it's not a non-conforming lot. The lot to the south by itself, the bigger lot, is a conforming lot, so there really aren't any issues with that one. Then the last two pages are the parcel combination affidavit along with the application that I got from the city of Mosinee. And it's not complete because it was put on hold pending this hearing. So that's really all I have.
So is the issue is before us because the city of Mosinee indicated that one of the lots was a non-conforming lot and could be built on, and therefore our options are to either combine it or look at a sale to the other owner. It would appear to be in the interest of the county to try to combine that for the purposes of sale.
Yes, this was
Is that why? That's why it's no. Oh, I apologize.
This was one of the parcels, or the two parcels were just taken in the last batch of in-rem tax foreclosure. And when we were looking at posting them for sale, David in my office said, One of these is one of those tiny sliver parcels that you've heard Connie referencing when she's been in here. And so I reached out to Rob to ask about combining the parcels, because when we have those sliver parcels, they don't sell. So it seemed to make more sense to me before we listed it for sale that we pursue combining the two parcels together to make it one larger parcel, to make it more appealing to a buyer. So that was the work that Rob did. So that, John, is why we looked into combining the two to make one bigger parcel, and then we would list it for sale as one parcel rather than two.
And you can see by the map that the surrounding parcels to these two parcels are generally larger than average parcels, so it fit more in the neighborhood as one parcel than a small sliver.
Chair Gibbs.
I guess I clearly think that moving forward with combining them makes sense. The question I have is, in light of the Supreme Court case, do we have to determine value of those both parcels separately first prior to combining them to determine whether or not we owe any back tax or back value to the property owner prior to us taking it?
Well, not to put the lawyer on the spot, he just walked in. But I think as we'll talk about in the next two items, Kim went and did get some appraisals for some other parcels. I think as a practical matter, similar to what, or consistent with what Rob referenced, my sense is getting an appraisal is a sound course of action for that reason you just referenced. Particularly in this instance where they're similar to the next instance where we're talking about doing something other than the traditional, hey, we put it out for sale, as is when we took it, or as it was when we took it. So if the direction from the committee is to combine them, what I would do first from the staff perspective is we'd work through CPZ to do that. I would go get an appraisal on each of them individually, the parcels as mapped individually, so that we have that documentation should the former landowner for either individual parcel come back at some point and say, hey, I'm owed pursuant to Tyler v. Hennepin County X funds for the infringement on the fair market value of the property or the negative impact you had on the fair market value based on the combination. So short answer, yes, I think we should get an appraisal.
Chair Gibbs.
Just to follow up to that, then the question then becomes if the value increases based on combining them compared to the two individual prices, how does that impact a requirement, if any, to reimburse the prior owner? And that one is a lawyer question.
That is a fine question, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think you got right to the heart of the question. I think it potentially would have an impact, depending on what the appraisals came out to for each parcel separately, and then what the impact of combination had on the overall sale. I think that could generate an argument either way that, hey, the value actually went up after combination, or that they had the opposite effect. I don't know that we necessarily know the answer, but I think we have to be aware that it could have an impact.
Like a question for you then, follow-up, are our transactional costs associated with basically combining the lots and the appraisals, are those eligible costs for the county to recover at the time of the sale in lieu of the Hennepin and the state law?
Yes.
So we would be able to recover all of those costs, so we would need to track any and all costs associated with that combining process.
I think we would be wise to track those costs because I think they are recoverable.
If I could add one thing, Kim, her recollection on these two parcels, just as a little bit of a practical matter, we believe they were owned by the same individual, so perhaps it makes your question in this instance a little less germane, but still something we should track and make sure, certainly moving forward, should we encounter this again, certainly go through that. But as a practical matter, I think we can get an appraisal. If it's the will of this body to combine them, we can get appraisals on them separately just to track that.
Any other questions? If not, what are the wishes of the committee? Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion that we combine the two parcels and get effectively 3 appraisals. One, the appraisal of each parcel separately, and then an appraisal of the lot when they're combined.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of authorizing the combining of the parcels and obtaining the appraisals will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
So then I have one question. As of right now, the combination is still on hold until we get the appraisals back and that determination's made? Because otherwise, if we go ahead and combine them and then the appraisals come back and it says it's 2 individual lots that are worth more than one combined lot, then am I going to be re-separating them again?
No.
No. So then we're
Correction.
going to go ahead and proceed with the actual combination?
My understanding is the direction is to combine the lots, but for the purposes of calculating potential gain, for the purposes of reimbursing if the owner, should they sell at a higher rate, we would want those separate appraisals. So there are 2 separate issues here. And so, thank you. All right, just the appraisal of 1105 West Street and potential retention by the county. So Kim, I think you had the appraisal. Who's taking the lead on this one?
Kim did all the work, so she went and got the appraisals that are in your packet.
So the appraisal for 1105 West Street is in the packet. It was done by the appraiser that we've used for our tax deed parcels for a couple decades now, I guess. There was a question this morning about the accuracy of the appraisal because it's not quite in line with the assessed value of the parcel. And so I called the appraiser and I said, can you give me some insight as to why there is, I think it was about a $12,000 difference there. And he said the parcel right now is zoned residential. It's zoned for 2 flat residential use, and it has an improvement value, which is basically the fact that the lot is paved. So they assigned about an $8,800 value to the paving of the lot. Since the parcel is zoned residential, that paving would have to be taken out, which he estimated would cost about $5,000. So that would decrease the sale value if someone was looking to purchase the property to put up a residential structure. That would decrease the value. He said the other thing that also decreases the value is right now the parcel is not big enough to build anything on. He said you couldn't even build a garage on it. It's too small. So a potential buyer would also have to acquire the parcel next to the lot if they wanted to build anything as far as housing on that lot. So none of the adjoining parcels are currently for sale. So if someone were to purchase it, they've purchased a vacant lot they can't do anything with. So that further diminishes the value of the parcel. So that is why he appraised it the way he did. It's not really in line with the assessed value, he said.
Are there any questions? And I think this is one of those that we recently took and we were putting out or considering for surplus property, and I think we heard internally that there was interest in the property.
Yeah, Jamie gave, from Parks, gave kind of a brief explanation last time, and she's here to answer any questions or elaborate, but succinctly put, it's adjacent to the highway shop area, the West Street location, where if that was redeveloped, it could be supplemental parking.
Chair Gibbs.
Our costs in the property are above the appraised value, is that correct?
Our costs in the property, and I have that sheet in the packet as well, and I thought I grabbed the hard copy and I did not. I believe the outstanding taxes on that one were $26,000.
Correct. I believe it's $26,151.40, and I will pull that up here.
And that's just the outstanding taxes. That doesn't include the cost of the appraisal or any of our other costs associated with that property.
So it's on page 21 of your packet.
Any questions? So the issue before us is, do we authorize it for sale? Do we retain it? And do we retain it with conditions? And how, Mike, in light of the Hennepin case, if we take a property and retain it, is there an obligation for us to set a value for internal purposes?
I don't know that you need to take formal action to set a value at the committee level. I just think we have to have the documentation to support what that value would be so we can determine whether the property owner is owed any excess money, and I think the appraisal accomplishes that to protect the county.
So in light of our policy to offer the property to our departments before we sell it, is there an affirmative action that needs to be taken by the committee or the county relative to retaining the property versus sale of the property?
I think it would make sense if the committee weighed in on retaining. I don't know that officially your rules say one way or another, but it makes sense to me that the committee would make an affirmative action on that.
All right. Are there any questions for the clerk or corporation counsel? Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question for the finance department. So the taxes due would be written off, and then what is the accounting transaction?
So the accounting transaction will hit the balance sheet under the accounts receivable, and then gain or loss on the books would be the other side.
Please use
Correct.
your microphones.
Yeah, we're writing off the taxes then?
Correct.
Okay.
Chair Gibbs.
I think in light of the West Side Master Plan and not knowing exactly, and especially in light of the fact that this is a lot that is non-conforming, non-buildable, and on top of that the appraised value comes in below cost that we have in the property, that we hold the property at least until a future point of when the West Side Master Plan is more into operations or more conditioned on what plans are there, rather than reacquiring it if at a later point we need it. So my motion would be to retain the property.
Administrator Leonard.
Just building on, thank you, Mr. Chair, just building on what Corporation Counsel referenced, I think formal action to retain the property makes sense, just in light of the statutory language that, and I don't have it in front of me, but I walked over to Mike, and my recollection is the statute is worded in such a way that once you take a parcel by tax deed, there are timelines on putting that up for sale. I think if we're not going to do that, formal action saying the county should retain it, which is in effect, we are buying it. We don't need to actually pay for it because we are owed more than what the appraisal comes back. So I think you have all the pieces in place to accomplish the end of what Chair Gibbs just referenced. But from a formal action standpoint, I think my preference would be that if that is the desire, in light of the potential value for the county, that you take formal action at this committee telling us to do that, and then we'll do the accounting work that Supervisor Marshall referenced and Sam kind of provided.
Yeah, and I do apologize. We'll write off the receivable, but it'll sit on our books as an asset. It's either a tax deed held by the county, or it will then turn into land or property owned by the county, depending on further action.
Any other questions? If not, what are your wishes?
We have a motion.
We do
I move to
Okay.
to retain the property.
we have a second? Second by Supervisor Poole. All right. Any discussion on that motion? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Next, discussion of appraisal on parcel 1682807, 1530084 in the village of Rib Mountain and potential retention by county. Is that you or Jim?
Yeah, this is the same issue in Jim's here, to give the update as to why there may be some value for the county to retain it. But again, Kim did all the work in getting the appraisal. You'll see the appraisal came in with a valuation of $12,500. The amount owed is set forth on page 42 of your packet. That amount being just in terms of direct taxes owed, $23,788.56. So again, similar situation. The amount the county is owed in back taxes exceeds the value based on the appraisal. So Jim, you want to elaborate kind of on what the thought process was when Kim sent out the memo on acquiring these parcels?
Yeah, this parcel we took a look at because there is an elementary school on Bittersweet, just north of this intersection, elementary school. Talking with the representatives from the village of Rib Mountain, they have some concerns about that school taking on additional students, some realignment, which can change that intersection. So we're probably going to be taking a look at that intersection sometime in 2026. Rib Mountain also has some concerns about the intersection in a whole. So we're going to take a look at it in 2026 to see possible change of configuration, if anything actually needs to be done with that intersection. Our concern is if something needs to be done with that intersection, we also need that parcel of land. I hate to sell that parcel of land off and have to come back within a year and have to buy that parcel back after it's been developed. My best guess is if something does happen to this intersection, I don't know what it would be for. I know Rib Mountain had mentioned a roundabout. I don't know if the warrants would be there, but it also possibly could become a right in, right out, which also would change the land value of that parcel. So our recommendation is just to hold on to that parcel till we can figure out exactly what's going to happen at that intersection.
Are there any questions for Jim or Kim? If not, what are your wishes? Chair Gibbs.
So is that a buildable lot right now?
When I talked to Gordy about this one this morning, he said, no, it isn't. Apparently it has issues with being flooded quite a bit. And the current owner or the previous owner who we took it on tax deed from had tried to sell it several times and was unsuccessful in doing so.
Any other questions? Chair Gibbs.
I make a motion that we retain the property until there's until the determination on that intersection is done, and then potentially list it after if the parcel is not needed.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Hart. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all is in favor of the motion to retain the property will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right, consideration of Wisconsin Public Service easement for North 28th Avenue in the Village of Maine. Chris is not here.
He's on the WebEx.
Oh, Chris is here. So Chris?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I consulted with WPS on both the easements that were previously on the agenda. This one was one that they initially thought wouldn't be needed. Then the installation in this area was paused. So they were interested in bringing us back. The questions at the last meeting revolved around what the purpose was. It's essentially for gas pipelines. There was also a question about can you build near it? Are there any limitations? The limitation in the easement is just that you do not allow permanent structures to be built over the easement area. So at that point, I would assume that you start from that point, working back with the setbacks and whatnot that would apply from the right of way. And as for the location, because the drawing was not to scale, the easement area does abut the former right of way. So it's as close to the road right away as possible. And so those were the questions I recall about this particular one. If there's anything else, I can certainly speak to that or reach out for additional information.
Are there any questions for Chris? Chair Gibbs.
Well, one of the questions, Chris, was WPS offering any consideration for the easement itself?
I did ask that one about the Marathon Park, as that question came up, and the response I got, these are different WPS personnel for each of the easements. They said that there are occasions that a compensation may be distributed, but that typically only happens during a road move. And so if the road is not moving and they're just essentially adding an easement, I don't know that they would see that as a typical, from their point of view, it's an instance where compensation would be distributed.
Are there any other questions? If not, what are your wishes? Supervisor Marshall.
I have one further question. In your opinion, Chris, does this increase the value of the property or decrease it? Or not change it at all?
It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but I would think that probably, if they're installing gas lines in the area, it's an extension of WPS's utility lines that would, facilitate certain types of development in that area. For the property itself, it would certainly take that strip away from the overall property in terms of not being able to build on it. But you would effectively, as I understand it, be, taking the size of the easement and then working back from there for setbacks. And so it would be something for the landowner and if there is a future construction project there to take into consideration, but that the gas would facilitate different types of development. And aside from building directly over the easement, there are no limitations from WPS's point of view.
Given the current setback requirements in most local ordinances, they wouldn't be able to build on this portion of the property anyway, would they?
I don't believe so, no.
Typically, there are setback requirements on both front, side, and backyard relative to where a structure can be located. If this is in proximity to the right-of-way, I would think that it wouldn't materially impact the value of the property, but the presence of a utility might enhance that value from a sale perspective. But speculation versus valuation. Any other questions? If not, what are your wishes? The issue would be either to grant or to deny the easement. Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion to approve the easement on the property on the village in the village of Maine.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Marshall. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the easement will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next is review and acceptance of November claims and question costs. Sam, is there anything you'd like to add or any questions? Go ahead.
Everyone should have received the reports, but I'm here to answer any questions on any question claims.
Are there any questions? If not, what are your wishes? Motion to accept and approve would be in order.
I'll make a motion to accept the questions claims.
Is there a second? Seconded by Chair Gibbs. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you. Review and acceptance of staff's 2023 action plan or audit plan of action memorandum. Sam.
Thank you. So in the packet is the memorandum on how we're going to address and handle some of the audit concerns that were brought up moving forward into the 2025 year, and some of the stuff we're already currently working on in the 24 year with cleanup. Can I answer any questions or areas of concern?
I think if you could just highlight some of the major things that you're working on, I think that would be beneficial not only for the committee, but for those that are watching.
Absolutely. So under the cash and handling, we want to review the policy and put a procedure in place so that we're making sure that we're encouraging proper cash handling and that the training's available and that the reconciliations are being done on a regular basis to make sure that our financial system is current. Under the ERP implementation, even though it continues to be a work in progress, we're getting a lot of that cleaned up, and we do have a dedicated staff to address one of the major challenges that we had in the 2023 audit, which dealt with grants, making sure that we train staff properly on that and that we're getting it recorded into the system in a timely manner. And then working with other staff in the county to make sure that they understand the system and are putting in things appropriately and that we work on the communication or the education aspect of it. Reconciliations, we're going to be moving to a month-end closing process so that by the preceding month, we should be closing that month out so that our records remain accurate and current. And then reporting, bringing forth to the committee here, making sure that you guys have year-to-date reports on a monthly basis, as well as an overall summarized expenditure report that shows month-to-date budget versus actuals for each department so that any concerns can be addressed in a timely fashion. And then the educational aspects, one thing to definitely bring forth and work on is understanding the different types of funds, the uses, and how we account for them and what dictates that. In addition, an annual memo so that similar to what you received a couple of weeks ago, kind of outlining what's in that fund balance because it's summarized in the financial statements so that there's a clear understanding of how that's laid out. And then policies and procedures, looking at and reviewing them to update them to be in a more plain language and easy to understand format. And then training staff to make sure that we're implementing all of the policies and procedures that we put forth. And then the biggest one is probably the centralization of finance to make sure that we have uniformity across the county.
Okay, we've had a number of discussions internally, and my comment was we've got a 2023 audit that came to us in 2024. We need to act on it in 2024. So I want to thank Sam for developing a plan on how we're going to address it. And ironically, this morning I received a phone call from Ryan from Baker Tilly asking about what the concerns were for the 2024 audit, and I had mentioned that we still had some issues relative to the reporting and the mapping and the reconciliation, and encourage them to prepare the audit earlier so that we weren't at the 11th hour trying to get it into the state, and he said they would look at the timelines. If you have some concerns that you'd like to have addressed in the 2024 audit, please let me know, but I think that this goes a long way at addressing some of those concerns that have been there there will be some education to us, and I would hope that we would continue to look at this throughout the year, to look at the progress that we've made. And I know we're continuing to have some implementation and mapping issues that complicate things, but I want to thank again administration and the finance department for the work to develop this plan. And I'm looking forward to the additional reporting and timely reporting for this committee as well as all of the standing committees. Chair Gibbs.
First off, I want to express my sincere thank you to Sam and your staff for taking on some of these projects, because I think they have been, in some cases, long overdue. I know that there's been challenges with implementation of our ERP system, but I really look forward to the one item that the financials, and I think we have an example of that financial, that combined financial, in the packet. And I want to applaud you for all of the great work that you've done, and thank you for those efforts. So,
Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too want to sincerely thank you, because for some unexplained reason at 2:37 I wake up in the morning and worry about things, and this is one of the things that I worry about. So I look forward to the education and better sleep with knowing that there are changes coming forth. So thanks.
Supervisor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question on, I know that under cash handling and security, you have an audit and compliance. Would that be appropriate to be added to the reconciliation line as well, since it's a decentralized department, that like a random audit to make sure people are doing the reconciliations? Would that be appropriate?
We most certainly could. We do plan on just popping in to make sure that they've gone through the entire process, that all of those checks are in there. We do have the line above there that says departments will be directed to make the daily deposits and the regular reconciliations. So those will be the monthly reconciliations with the dual signatures on there.
And I was under 3, under the reconciliations, if under the monthly reconciliations, if we could have just an audit check, not 100%, but like a random audit check, just to make sure they're being done.
My apologies. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Supervisor Lemmer.
Do we know if these changes will impact the audit, make their job easier, and then therefore they'll spend less time maybe creating some of the financials for us?
Yes, in the fact that when we get there, we've been through the review process, so it's a lot less likely that they'll find any errors in there because you're having multiple hands in there. But then also having that secondary or that check by a committee saying, "Yep, we received the monthlies and we were able to address and ask any of those concerns." Still, there's complexities when it comes to getting the information compiled into the financials, but it definitely will fare well for having a good, clean audit.
Chair Gibson.
and if I might, the one thing that I look forward to is the centralization of the accounting. I think that in itself promotes consistency. Rather than having departmental silos that sometimes creates challenges. One may understand the accounting system one way and handle something one way, but if we have and fully implemented a centralized accounting department, I think that is going to move a long ways towards consistency throughout our financials and our statements. So thank you for that.
Supervisor Marshall.
And then one thing that wasn't addressed, and it's not really procedural, but just that is there a commitment to have the annual comprehensive annual financial report in next year's audit?
Correct. Yep. We talked about that this morning.
Thank you very much.
So I asked that this be put on as an action item versus an educational item, because I think it's important that we accept the plan of action in our, sort of our fiduciary role or oversight role. So I would, if there are no other questions, ask, what are your wishes? I think it is important that we have this accepted and then sort of put our stamp of approval on the plan. Supervisor Marshall.
I will make a motion to accept the staff's 2023 audit plan of action.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion? Oh, Lance?
Sure. I was just going to say the kind of to Supervisor Marshall's point that, and Sam alluded to this, what is really underlying this is a different approach, as Chair Gibbs referenced, from finance. It's finance taking the lead on a lot of things, and I applaud Sam and, you know, putting this plan together. It is going to be much more finances here to not only assist you when we get to the audit, but it's how do we train staff throughout all of these processes to make sure that there's not one way it's done in this department and another way it's done here. Whether it's everything from cash handling to grants being entered in the system. I don't think we're going to get to a place, I don't think it's reasonable to say that we won't have issues with certain things. I mean, our grant challenges, at the end of the day, we implemented a system based on what a consultant told us to do, and then a year later, the consultant said, why did you do it that way? You should have done it the other way. But this will really help, and I think it moves us substantially forward. I don't know that it'll make the audit painless, because I've never been part of a painless audit, but it should make it a lot less, there should be fewer surprises in terms of how we talk about it. And when departments, when we ask for information, they should be much more amenable to or able to answer those questions. I mean, even when you start on cash handling at the top, I don't think we're far away from, you know, you look at some of the approaches that other entities take. Go to a Packer game, you go to any, there's no cash. I took my kids to the water park, there's no cash. I don't know that we get there, certainly not next year. But it's an iterative process where we continue to do those things to check boxes off that, again, makes the audit, maybe one line goes away from the audit that you have decentralized cash handling. I don't know that we ever get away from it, but we'll get better. So if you have anything that occurs to you that, oh, you know, as Supervisor Marshall referenced, hey, is something missing? Let us know. But we really did go through that audit and try to identify what are some action steps, what are the reasonable ones to kind of tick off each year, and they'll be built into Sam's work plan. So thanks for the opportunity to kind of have staff take that first crack at it, and we appreciate the feedback.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of accepting the staff audit plan will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Again, thank you for your work on this, both to date and into the future. All right, we'll go to 6B, resolution approving grant application for potential future forest land purchase. Is that Jamie or Tom or both?
It's not on. No.
No.
It's not on.
Okay, now you can hear me. All right. Thank you, Chair Robinson. So this resolution before you today has gone to both the Forestry Recreation Committee and the ERC Committee. And occasionally I get a call, an email, someone bumps into me and asks, does the county ever consider purchasing forests to add on to their county forest units? And I say yes. We've gone through a planning process through the county's strategic plan, the county's comprehensive plan, and the county forest land use plan. And all three of those plans outline if land becomes available that would be strategically next to county forest lands and block in well, that we would consider purchasing them. Back in 2010, the county forests did get authorization through the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program to apply for county forest grants to pay for 50% of the purchase price that would come from a state grant. And since then, we've purchased about 900 acres, and we've utilized that program of the 50% of about $925,000. So we do occasionally use that to help pay for those purchases. And I received a call from a landowner with 40 acres, 41 acres almost, I guess it is, and he asked if we'd be interested in potentially purchasing this property. I gave him the what we do in this purchase is typically we need to go to the committees, we need to get authorization to secure an appraisal, apply for a grant, and to negotiate, and then we would bring anything back to the county board and the committees if something is agreed upon. And he agreed to that a couple, I guess, 3 months ago. So right now, this resolution in front of you is to authorization to apply for a grant, the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Grant, as I mentioned, negotiate and secure an appraisal. We talked a lot about appraisals in the tax deed process here earlier on. This is a in-depth appraisal that the state needs to approve for the grant. So it's quite costly. It's between probably $3,000 and $4,000. The appraisal is paid for 50%. If we purchase a property, we would get 50% of that back. If not, that would be a cost borne upon the county. And the county does have a segregated land purchase budget that we have money that would match the 50% purchase price, and along with that, match any costs involved in the purchase. So with that, I would answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Tom? And this came through the ERC committee. Scott?
Yeah, just a quick question. Accepting this grants, and if we do in the future, or we do buy forest property with this, would that make it so we couldn't use that land for development or resell the land? Is it permanently a county forest land then, or can we put it to other uses?
Good question. So the process would be is we would purchase the property, enter it into the county forest law. That would stay in the county forest law in perpetuity. So it would be very little chance that if it is enrolled into the county forest law, we would withdraw it unless there would be put to higher or better purpose, which you've got to meet a lot of criteria to do that. So county forest law is a permanent program. It's been around since 1927, and if you put it into that law, it stays there unless there are some really, really good reasons not to have it in the law, and then that would require a 2/3 county board vote and approval by the state of Wisconsin DNR.
Tom, do you want to talk through the other resolution or action from the township that?
Oh, sure. Thank you. So I did go to the town of Reed town board meeting a couple of nights in November or October, November, and presented this to them. We always like to get approvals from the local towns before we would go and go for a purchase. And that resolution basically just says that they support the purchase if the purchase could be agreed upon between the county and the private landowner.
Chair Gibbs.
Two questions. One, and I'm assuming that I know the answer to that, this is contiguous to our current county forest, and the 41 acres roughly is clearly forested acres and probably is not developable right now as other potential industrial or anything else. Is that probably accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. It is fully wooded, used for hunting and recreation purposes for as long as it's been there, and we would manage it as such, open for recreation, public access, and I believe there's timber on the property that could be harvested now that would further reduce the cost to the county.
And if I might.
Go ahead.
Is the land also fairly wet in that area, if I'm classifying it as such?
Yeah, I mean, there's those buildable areas in there with holding tanks and mound systems, but typically that land there next to the county forest is wet and very questionable for buildings.
Any other questions? If not, what are your wishes relative to the application for the land purchase? Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion to support the resolution to approve the grant application for a potential future forest land purchase.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lammer. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Resolution to allocate remaining unobligated and unencumbered American Rescue Plan Act funding to comply with U.S. Treasury guidance. Chris?
Yes, sir. As stated in the memo in your packet, the intent of this resolution is to be in line with the board's guidance to ensure that all ARPA funds are obligated and that funds are not sent back. So what I did with the finance director last week, we went through all the numbers in Workday, and I consulted with departments that had ARPA funds in play. And together in the resolution, what you see is on the first page, there's an amount of funds that were previously unencumbered. And then on a second page are the projects that are in play in 2024 that have additional funds to unencumber. So in total, you're looking at an amount of money that you would then, per the guidance, obligate in a way that allows the county to utilize the funds. In the case of the resolution, a portion of the funds would go to the Regional Forensic Science Center, as it's a project that's large enough in budget and scope and under contract to obligate the funds. And similarly, the remainder of the funds in the resolution, we identified the utilities line and facilities as money that's previously spent that could be, the ARPA funds would supplant. And that would be allowable under the lost revenue calculation per the guidance. There's one piece of the resolution that after submitting the packet came up that then the Corp Council looked into. It was with bug tussle. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in 2022, the county had pledged $235 per mile as part of the project, which hadn't been paid, most likely because the work was ongoing. But Corp Council had confirmed with bug tussle that this was not nested within the other funds that the county board had been recently working with them on, but in addition to as a forgivable loan. And so that amount was $142,000 and $142,175. So the resolution in the packet would need to be amended specifically on the PSC broadband grants unencumber line on page 2, which was in the packet. It's listed as $1,087,000, I think $10. That would be reduced by the pledge amount to $944,835, which subsequently reduces the 2024 subtotal line directly beneath that. And then when you combine that with previously unencumbered funds, you get a grand total of $3,208,376 that this resolution would effectively commit and meet the guidance. Similarly, because of the numbers cited in the be it further resolved clauses, you would adjust the last be it further resolved to $1,342,996. I did make these amendments in the event the committee does make them. so that this resolution could be modified today, but also for the county board tonight. In addition,
Chris, if I could just,
my discussion.
if I could just interject
Yes,
that,
I apologize.
that Administrator Leonard had distributed an updated resolution to the committee, so.
Oh, okay. So I apologize. So what you see in front of you is everything I just said. But the last thing I wanted to note is that there are additional funds within these projects that haven't been completely obligated, but within facilities and parks and other departments, we've been working over the last couple of weeks to ensure that those departments are obligating them through either an interagency agreement or through a modification of a contract, so that we're meeting the letter of the law per U.S. Treasury. In the event that a project with ARPA funds that are obligated were not used, the guidance allows you to then reallocate those funds to another eligible project. The real key is to have all the funds obligated by the end of this month.
Are there any questions? Any? Supervisor Lemmer.
So we're taking the remaining ARPA money and we're basically replacing the social improvement funds in one part with ARPA. So I guess my question with that is, can you just talk about the reason why we need to replenish that social improvement fund? And then I have the other question. The other portion is going towards our utilities. Are we deficit spending in our utility budget? Is that how I'm reading this?
Chris, I'll start, and then you can fill in. On the social improvement piece, very astute question. Supervisor Marshall had the same question earlier today. Excuse me. Essentially what you're doing at the conclusion of the Regional Forensic Science Center project, based on the fundraising that has been done, based on the fact that you got federal dollars that at the time of the social improvement fund committance, you didn't know you were going to get. And based on this allocation, should the board approve this, of these ARPA funds, that entirely committed 4.2 million-ish of social improvement fund, you're not going to use. There's a reason we haven't in this resolution that Sam and Chris didn't include a line that says, hey, also decommit these social improvement fund dollars at this time. And Sam and Chris can talk through in a more polished sense that what I'm going to say is that'll happen later, because right now Chris is still working through the process on the federal side to get the $2 million. We also are holding open the period during which people can commit and pledge dollars through the community foundation to donate to the project. And once we close the project, pay all the bills, then we'll get to that social improvement fund piece. So the short answer is yes, all of those funds they will be essentially decommitted through board action in the future based on the capital stack that came through on that project. With respect to utilities, as Chris said, we've been paying the utilities. It's simply that the easy way to meet the encumbrance guidelines from U.S. Treasury is to simply take those bills that we have paid, take the funds that are remaining, the $1,343,996 that is going to utilities, and simply say we're utilizing those ARPA funds for that suitable purpose for paying those bills, which will essentially free up the previously allocated through the budget dollars that were used for that, which will then flow through based on your existing policies into, in the year following the audit, fund your capital improvements. It's essentially a way to get rid of the time crunch for the utilization of the funds. Sam and Chris, you guys can say that more artfully than I just did.
In respect to the social improvements fund, again, it's not addressed in here, partly because the way that resolution was written is up to $4.2 million. At the commencement of this project, it becomes unallocated because that resolution no longer has bearing over the funds that are in there. And then at that point, depending on board or committee action, what happens with those funds, if nothing, it'll go down into CIP through the working capital policy. The other reason that we haven't unencumbered or uncommitted them is because we still have cash flow in this project too. It's 10 million, 10 to 14 million overall for the morgue. Sorry, I don't remember that right off the top of my head. But it does allow us to have that cash flow available because the state doesn't give us all that money up front. They give it to us in installments. And the federal, they also too may not give it all to us at one given time. So this makes sure that we have enough there to support that. I think that addressed the social improvement fund.
Chair Gibbs.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. Sam, the one question I have, and maybe this would go to Chris too, is obviously under the ARPA restrictions, we can only allocate or utilize $10 million under lost revenue. So are we confident that we don't have more than 10 million of I don't want to call them unqualified projects, but projects that are now characterized under the lost revenue so that our lost revenue amount spent is below the $10 million limit?
Given the calculations that I've seen in the past, I'm fairly confident that we are situated in a good spot there.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, what are your wishes? Chair Gibbs.
I'll make a motion to support the resolution to allocate the remaining unobligated and unencumbered American Rescue Plan funding to comply with the U.S. Treasury guidance as presented in the packet, or as presented, the updated version.
All right, is there a second? Second by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you. Next item is a motion to go into closed session. If somebody is desirous of making that motion, if you could please read it. Supervisor Lemmer.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session with a roll call vote required pursuant to state statute 19.85 sub 1 sub E for the purpose of conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, to wit, discussion of strategy and current negotiations and proposals relative to Deputy Sheriff's collective bargaining agreement.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Marshall. Any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Robinson, Marshall, Gibbs,
Aye.
Hart, Lemmer, Poole, Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you.
Jordan, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to put you in the lobby, so you can become a lobbyist for a little while, and we'll bring you back in at the end. All right, if you could.